Welcome back, everyone, to another video. Today we are going to be reviewing Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This is one of those movies that I went in not knowing a ton about. I've played Dungeons & Dragons once or twice in my life, but never really got into it much. That being said, I do know some things about it, so I kind of knew a little bit of what I was going into here. But yeah, we're gonna take a dive into just the movie in general. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't watched it yet, save this and then come back later and watch this after you've watched the movie. Yeah, so if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe button, letting me know that you guys like the content that I'm putting out, and let's dive into the review. Alright, let's talk about the good. So, the biggest thing with this movie is its characters. And that's very clear from the very beginning of the movie. You have the two characters in like the kind of prison, and they're describing their life and giving you backstory. And they want to do that early on because obviously this is a movie about the characters and the character's journey. And that's really what's being advertised here. The magic of Dungeons & Dragons and the character building of Dungeons & Dragons. So, we have Chris Pine as kind of like the leader of this group. I might forget like their exact name because they have some pretty weird names. We have Michelle Rodriguez as like the sidekick barbarian kind of lady. You have this, like, she's kind of like, she can transform into different animals. And she's actually played by Sophia Lillis. And you guys might know her from, I didn't realize who she was because she's not like a super popular actress, but then I did realize she did play in the It series, so that was pretty cool to see her back in a different kind of movie. And then of course we see our one character Simon, which is played by Justice Smith. I very much enjoyed his character, and I'll get kind of to that in a second. But just as like a general overall group, I enjoyed them. I thought that they really worked off each other really well, especially Michelle Rodriguez and Chris Pine. They just had like a really good chemistry on set, or just in the movie in general. And throughout the movie, you get these little like Chris Pine is this very like annoying, like, I don't want to say like he doesn't offer anything to the team because he does, but that's like the whole joke is that like he doesn't have any weapons. He's not that strong because like she's the strong one. They have a like someone who can like transform into animals, and they have a magic user, and he's just kind of like the plan setter, and they kind of just go along with that joke for the movie. As for the barbarian lady, she just kind of like is the joke repeater in this, and because she has such a serious kind of tone to her, it's funny when she like comes out with the jokes, honestly, because I guess she just kind of has that face and tone when she says these things. The next thing I want to move into is the comedy. The comedy in this movie, for the most part, was pretty funny. There's one scene specifically, or like one or two scenes I want to talk about specifically. The first one being at the very beginning of the movie, when Chris Pine is like before the board to kind of get released from prison, and he keeps asking for this one guard or like one council member that's not there yet, and he's trying to tell the story, and he just keeps referencing this, I think his name is John or Johnny or something like that, and he keeps trying to tell the story, but he's like, oh, John would have known who he was. And I just thought it was such a stupid way to introduce Chris Pine's character, but it was also genius because it's exactly what you would expect Chris Pine to be like in this universe. And then going into one of the other comedy bits, there's this part of the movie where they have to go to a graveyard to retrieve the helmet that can allow magic users to like bypass spells. Well, they have to dig up these graves. And just kind of like in the actual Dungeons & Dragons game, you have you can ask the dead 5 questions before they die, and you can never ask them a question again. But you have to ask them 5 questions, no more, no less. So they finally get what they want, but they don't. I think they ask it in like 4 questions. So the last one they don't need. And they ask the one he goes, what's 2 + 2? And he's just gonna answer and die. Well, he goes, oh, I don't know, I'm bad at math, and just falls right into his his coffin. And I just thought that was really dumb and funny. That whole scene where they were in the graveyard was just really dumb, because they're trying to find who knew where the helmet was, and it just became really stupid and really funny. I remember my whole theater was laughing at that part. There is another scene, it's not as funny, but when they go to the dragon, they actually they find this dragon, and you know, you're expecting the dragon to be like super fit and be able to just breathe fire at will. Well, this dragon is, you know, a bit overweight and is more blowing smoke than really fire. And it's more about the fact that he's just really fat than the fact that he's like, can really do any harm. And that just becomes like a really funny and dumb joke in the movie. As far as the CGI and the magic in this movie goes, so obviously we had two kinds of, actually we had three different kinds of magic users, being the Red Wizard Lady, which was our main villain of this movie. And by the way, she was fantastic in this movie, especially with her backstory. I really enjoyed her. But Simon is this kind of like con man at first who, you know, has to learn how to use his magic abilities in a, you know, they did his character really well because they make him this scared kind of coward guy, but by the end of the movie, you know, he's still kind of this like kind of guy, like he doesn't know what he wants to do, but he's mastered his magic, and that just makes the ending really good, because you finally get that like new version of him where he can cast spells and really contribute to the team. And on the other hand, you get, I think her name is Doric, and she can like transform into like different animals and stuff. And there's this one scene that we get, and it's when it's kind of like near the beginning of the movie, where she's like a fly, and like then she turns into like a bird and a squirrel and a deer, and there's just so much like things that she turns into in the movie that, like, I think at one point she even turns into a snake. And the transformations that they do with that just really, they really looked good to me. Because a lot of times in movies, I think that when they do transformations, they try to hide them off screen. But this one was this time they did it pretty well. Also, kind of getting into some of the other magic uses. At one point in the movie, when they're in the dragon's lair, they accidentally destroy this bridge, and they use this like, it's like a staff to make portals throughout the movie. And this kind of becomes like a big token that they use to kind of help them throughout the movie. But and I think this shot was even in the trailer. There was a specific shot that I really thought like just looked cool visually. And it's when the transformation girl, they put a portal on the bottom of this carriage, and then like the camera starts like sideways, and she like goes into it, like, and the camera pans and turns with her as the changing location. And it was all one shot. And I just thought that was really cool, the way that they did that shot. I don't know, that was just me personally. As far as the world building goes, they did fine. Like I said, I don't know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, but what I do know, as far as what I do know from it, they introduced at least enough, and you know, maybe even a little bit past that, to you know, get the job done. There is one small thing that I do want to talk about in my mixed part with this. But for the most part, they got a lot, you know, they introduced a couple of creatures, they you know, they made this world feel like it's not just humans, and I really appreciated that, because, you know, it needs to be said that it's not, even though our, you know, our band of misfits that we have are human, except for the one lady, which I'm not sure if she's all human, they all appear as human. So it's nice to see goblins and dragons, of course, and all these different creatures that are in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, to really make that world feel like it's not just another world where these kind of creatures don't exist, because that's the whole point of Dungeons and Dragons, is these weird mystical creatures. Moving on to the mixed, I only have one thing I really want to talk about here, and that was the thing that I kind of wanted to see in this movie. So, the one thing that I kind of do know about Dungeons and Dragons is that a lot of it is probability based, and I would have loved to see some kind of joke or even just a reference to the fact of like the probability of getting something right. I would have really enjoyed if they like played on that joke, like, oh, you know, you have a 1 in 10 or a 25% chance of getting this right. I think that would have been a really interesting idea to explore with, but we didn't get anything like that in the movie. And that kind of was like a little disappointing. But again, not enough to ruin the movie for me. And finally, we have the bad. The one thing, there's really not many things to talk about bad with this movie, because I'll give you guys my full, like how I felt about this movie on a scale from 1 to 5 or whatever in a second here. But the one bad thing about this movie I do have to say is that there were 1 or 2 moments where I felt like either the emotion or the comedy just wasn't there. They tried to do a moment. The one thing that especially got me was near the end of the movie, when the barbarian lady was gonna die. There, like, not the whole part, but there was a sliver in there where it just felt too predictable, too, like, just cheesy, very cheesy. They played it off very, it just didn't impact me as much as I would have liked it to, because I did like that. I really liked that character, and I felt like they could have done a little bit more with that. So that's, I think, my one bad thing I had to say about this movie. But all in all, I think it was a great movie. Definitely just a tad higher than what I was expecting. And especially because I've never even really played Dungeons & Dragons, I would definitely say if you have seen the movie, leave your thoughts down below. I'd love to know what you think of the movie, you know, having played Dungeons & Dragons, and, you know, how it kind of correlates to the movie. If you guys do want to see my full kind of like typed review or whatever, I'll leave my Letterboxd here, and then you can also see my ranking that I gave it as well. And I think that's just gonna cover it, guys. So thank you guys so much for watching my review, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace, guys.